When you think of ancient Egypt, what comes to mind? Probably those mighty pharaohs, that incredible art, and of course, the colossal pyramids that just seem to defy time itself. It gives you this image of an unshakable, eternal civilization. But here's the thing, that's only half the story. Because that eternal kingdom, it once faced absolute, total annihilation, a dark age so catastrophic it almost wiped Egypt off the map for good.
So, let's dive right into that. How does a civilization at the absolute peak of its power, a culture literally built on confidence and divine order, suddenly find itself teetering on the edge of total collapse? That's the incredible mystery we're going to unpack. It is just this staggering contrast, isn't it? On one hand, you have the myth, the Egypt of the Great Pyramids, this land of endless bounty and perfect divine harmony. And on the other hand, you have the terrifying reality of what came next, an age of absolute fear, where every single thing that held their society together just began to crumble.
To really get what happened, we actually have to go back to the Golden Age itself, right to the peak of what we call the Old Kingdom. Because hidden away, inside one of its last great monuments, was this chilling premonition, a dark hint of the disaster that was coming.
Okay, so this is the classic self-image of the Pyramid Age, taken from the causeway of a king named Unas. And on its walls, his artists carved what was basically the perfect Egypt. You see these scenes of rich harvests, healthy animals, just endless bounty. It was, let's be honest, propaganda in stone. It was all designed to show that the king was doing his job, keeping the gods happy and guaranteeing prosperity for everyone. But then, you walk a little further down that same wall, and you find this. It's like a crack in that perfect facade, and it is one of the most haunting images in all of Egyptian art. I mean, look, these aren't mythical monsters or demons. No, these are shockingly realistic pictures of starving people. You can see their ribs, you can feel their weakness. For the very first time, the idea of chaos wasn't some abstract myth anymore. It had a real human face, and it was a terrifying omen of what was to come.
And that terrible omen, well, it was about to become a brutal reality. See, the fall of the Old Kingdom wasn't just one single event. It was a perfect storm, a complete and catastrophic failure on 3 different fronts all at the same time.
The first domino to fall was the climate. The entire Egyptian civilization, everything they were, was built on one thing, the annual, predictable flooding of the River Nile. It was the bedrock of their world. But then, the unthinkable happened. The floods just stopped coming. The water levels fell, year after year. The fields dried up, the crops failed, and the land of plenty became a land of starvation. Some ancient texts even talk about cannibalism. It was that bad. So, with the gods seemingly abandoning them, who did the people look to? Their divine king, of course. But the king, a pharaoh named Pepi II, was in his 90s. He'd been on the throne for decades and was now frail. A pharaoh was supposed to publicly prove his fitness to rule through these athletic rituals, but an elderly Pepi just couldn't do it anymore. His physical weakness became a powerful symbol for the weakness of the entire kingdom. So you have a failing river and a failing king. And that's when the final, and maybe most important, domino fell: their belief system. The central idea of Egypt, that a divine king guarantees order and keeps chaos at bay, it completely shattered. The very glue that had held their society together for centuries just dissolved, and Egypt was plunged into a dark age.
With the central government in Memphis totally gone, Egypt fractured. The whole country just broke apart into these small, competing little territories. And into this power vacuum steps a totally new kind of leader, the local warlord.
In this incredibly uncertain new world, people lost faith in the big state religion. They turned to personal, do-it-yourself magic to try and get some sense of control back. We see this in artifacts like these really unsettling masks, which weren't for the dead, but were worn by the living to try and control hidden forces. Or check out these curse pots. The idea was you'd write your enemy's name on a simple pot, maybe in destructive red ink, and then you'd ritually smash it, symbolically wiping them out. This was magic for an age of fear.
And this new attitude is just perfectly captured by this one guy, a regional governor turned warlord named Antifi. The kind of boastful, over-the-top language that used to be only for the pharaoh was now being used by local strongmen to build their own little personality cults. In his own mind, he wasn't just a leader. He was a hero without equal, past or future. And you want to see real ego? Nothing, and I mean nothing, shows this massive power shift more clearly than Antifi's own tomb. He covers the walls with stories about how great he is, all about how he fed his people while everyone else was starving. And the king? The supposedly divine pharaoh? He gets mentioned exactly once, in a tiny little symbol you could easily miss. The message couldn't be clearer. The pharaoh is irrelevant. Power now belongs to men like me.
So what happens when you have dozens of guys like Antifi, all with massive egos, all scrambling for power and resources? Well, you guessed it. Conflict was absolutely inevitable. The Dark Age was about to slide into its most destructive phase yet, a full-scale civil war.
You can almost see the grim, step-by-step logic of how it all fell apart. First, central power just vanishes. Then, the local warlords start teaming up, forming alliances. Those alliances eventually harden into two rival kingdoms, one in the north and one in the south. And just like that, Egypt was two separate lands again, and they were about to go to war to decide who would be the master of the entire nation.
The war reached this horrifying new low, with an act of what, to them, was unimaginable blasphemy. Armies from the north marched on Abydos. Now, this was the sacred burial ground of Egypt's very first kings. They looted the tombs, set them on fire, and smashed the royal mummies. In one single, brutal act, they physically severed Egypt's connection to its own sacred past. It was an act that horrified everyone.
But you know what? That very act of desecration, it lit a fire. It provoked a violent reaction from the south. And from the ashes of this brutal civil war, a new leader would rise, a man determined to end the Dark Age and make Egypt whole again.
His name was Mentuhotep. He was a warlord from the southern city of Thebes and a follower of the war god Montu. He marched his armies north, crushed his rivals, and reunited Egypt by sheer force. Then he crowned himself the new king of both the north and the south, Mentuhotep II. The Dark Age was finally over.
But that victory, it came at a brutal, brutal human cost. Near his tomb, archaeologists discovered a single mass grave, and in it were the bodies of 60 of his most loyal soldiers.
And these bodies, they're like silent witnesses to just how vicious the fighting really was. When they were analyzed, the injuries were horrific. Some had been pierced right through the chest with arrows. Others had their skulls completely caved in from furious blows. They must have laid on the battlefield for a long time too, because their remains had been picked out by vultures before they were finally collected and buried. This was the real price of unity. So Mentuhotep founded a new era, what we call the Middle Kingdom. But Egypt was not the same. You just don't go through a trauma like that and come out unchanged. This was a civilization that was now scarred by the memory of collapse. It was forever different. And you can see this new warrior mindset perfectly in how they started to prepare for the afterlife. Back in the Old Kingdom, people trusted that these huge, expensive stone carvings on their tomb walls would get the job done. But after seeing sacred tombs like those at Abydos get desecrated, people in the Middle Kingdom wanted something a bit more personal, a bit more secure. So they started placing these small wooden models of bakeries, breweries, workshops inside their tombs. It was like a private, tangible guarantee that they'd have everything they needed for eternity.
This new, more cautious Egypt had learned a hard lesson. Order is fragile, and you have to be ready for anything. So later, when a new group of foreign invaders, the Hyksos, took over the north, the old Egypt might have collapsed all over again. But not this new Egypt. They adapted. They actually copied the Hyksos' better military technology, especially their powerful composite bow. Then they used those new and improved weapons to drive the invaders out, and in doing that, they transformed themselves into a fully armed, fully charged military superpower.
Which really leaves us with a final thought. The collapse of the Pyramid Age was, without a doubt, Egypt's darkest hour. It was a time of terror, chaos, and death. But it was also the crucible that forged a new kind of resilience, a new adaptability, and ultimately a new strength that would launch the great golden age of empire. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What strengths are being forged in our own turbulent times?